What's going on, everybody? You've got the cardboard coach here with your boy, Coach Co. And team, I am very excited to introduce today's guest, Mr. Jason Kuntz from OTIA. How you doing today, man?
Good, man. I really appreciate having me on. It was good, finally meet in person at the National, man. It
Yeah,
was good
man.
to catch up.
Yeah, that's why it's like ever since we kind of got let out in Canada, I'm like, I gotta make I'm 100% gonna make trips down there more regularly now that there's not all these crazy regulations in this country. So I'm like, you let me out, I'm gone. I'm not going back.
You guys are off the leash now, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can you can
exactly.
you
I'm
can
like,
roam.
if you shut this down, I'm not coming back. So that's my stance, and I'm sticking to it. So you are. I also failed to mention the fact that you also are you owner of ISA grading?
Lead investor. There's multiple investors, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I kind of oversee everything. So I mean, in throughout the card business, I'm invested in several businesses and like across everything. I'm invested in like I don't know 28 businesses. So yeah, it's one of many. If you go to my OT, you'll see a list of everything that I've kind of messed around with.
Just like everything that you've been a part of.
Yeah, yeah.
So for anyone who doesn't know who you are, I'd love for you to give a brief introduction as to like, I mean, I basically gave a little summary of like, Jason Otia and ISA grading currently, but you have been a big player in the space. A little controversial at times. We'll talk about that at some point. But I I mean you're an integral part of the hobby's history, man. Like you were one of the first people to grade with PSA, were you not?
Yeah, I mean, back in 95, I graded my first cards. That's what, 28 years ago? I mean, it's pretty wild. Yeah.
And what were those price points like back then?
So back then I don't remember, but I do like when I kind of started doing bulk in like the late 90s, early 2000s, like it was $2.40 to $2.80 for like 3 week turnaround was my best deals I ever got. But reality is like it probably hung around like $4 or $5 for a really long time. But there was a couple of years when PSA was like struggling, and they would call us and say, "Hey, like we need 10,000 cards this week," and then it was just a negotiation, which is hilarious to where we're at now, where
Yeah.
it was like over a year wait at some points. So
How does so what were you grading at these? Actually, the first question I want to ask is were there any upcharges back then?
no, and I remember the first upcharge ever. Sorry. Um, no, I think upcharges probably started like 2010. So like it was kind of like this weird, like what do you mean upcharge? It was an expensive card, and I forget it actually wasn't me. The first upcharge was a Hank Aaron 10. And at the show they were charging like 25 to 35 to grade, and they told the dealer they wanted $150. And I remember like this argument. And I'm like,
Really?
dude, you just got a Hank Aaron 10. Like you
Yeah, yeah,
shouldn't
yeah.
be but he's like, but I paid 35 or whatever it was to grade it. Like, so that was the first of PSA trying to, get more, I guess, of, for the upcharges. But yeah, that was new probably 10 or 12 years ago.
And so you're grading like $3 a card for a little bit. What are you grading at this
Yeah.
time? Like
At at
late
that point, everything.
2000s? Yeah, like what's everything? Tell me everything.
Like 75 tops baseball that are going to get sevens and eights because you can make $2 or $3 a card, and you're just, I needed to hit certain quotas every month. So at that point, when you're slabbing stuff, it really doesn't matter because people want, now we're kind of like in this junk era slabs.
Yeah.
Back then we weren't really there yet. So it was almost like any card in a slab was going to be $7, $8. And, like literally, I just remember like buying 75 top sets, 75 mini sets, and just sending the whole set. And you get
Really?
sevens, eights, yeah, yeah, just to
Were
get
you
the
like
numbers up.
any review process or just like fuck it?
Sometimes fuck it, just
Yeah.
like I need to hit, like I need to hit quotas, and if the cards come back fives and sixes, I'll lot them together and still break even.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it was a different time, man. It was wild. It was wild back then because there was only maybe like 3 or 4 people like submitting in bulk. It just it's just such a different world
Do you know who
now
the
compared to
other
back then.
people, and like when you say bulk, how many cards are we talking about here?
I was doing like 25,000 a month for 10 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Do you
a
know
lot
who
of
the other
cards.
people that were grading in like mass quantities were?
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
do. Few of them retired now. Then there was like Four Sharp Corners came on the scene in like mid 2000s, and there was a couple guys in the late 90s too that they were cracking so much like factory sets and I cracked a lot of bigger. I cracked like 86 floor basketball and stuff like that, but like a lot of it was just math. Like back then, I cracked 8,000 cases of 2001 Upper Deck Golf when it came out, and
2,000 cases?
that 8,000 cases.
8,000 cases.
8,000 cases of 2001 Upper Deck Golf.
That's
And that
crazy.
was one of the best. Yeah, it was one of the best breaks ever because at the time you'd get 6 to 7 Tigers a case. Cases were, I think, $175. PSA 10 Tigers were $175. So like one Tiger 10 out of the case covered everything. And you would usually get 3 or 4 10s because those come out generally pretty clean. And there's all these other Tigers, just like, so that was kind of like probably a 20x deal. It's other people would crack 10 cases, and I was like, why not do this over and over again? So I was having pallets shipped, and we had, I had a lot of, at the time, I had friends from high school ripping 24 hours a day,
Wow.
paying them per case. We had girls over drinking, like just partying, drinking open cases. And it was a pretty wild time, man.
Did the girls know like how much money in cardboard was in front of them?
Not really, no.
No,
Like, and,
there's
and
no
it's,
way. They're like, what the hell are these guys doing?
they yeah, they thought we were nerds, and everybody
Yeah.
thought we were nerds back then. And that's why we never really took pictures, because like there was a point where my entire basement, like 4 feet high, was wrappers, like in a swimming pool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
we would put pillows underneath and jump into the wrapper. And it's like thinking now how you see all these guys with the walk around shows with the videos and stuff. People are like, I can't believe you don't have footage of that. It's like, well, we didn't really want footage of that. Like it was, kind of embarrassing. But like
Yeah.
it's like when you go to meet your girlfriend's parents, they're like, well, what do you do for a living? And you're kind of like, baseball cards. And like, well, what do you do for money? So
Is
yeah,
that what
we've come a long way in
is
that.
that what you were doing full time at like at that time? Is that what you were doing full time?
Yeah, so I started in like 93, going to my card shop, local card shop, going and shoveling snow all day, going to the card shop, opening packs, blowing all the money. And then pretty much when everybody kind of like started to shift out of it, it was like, we can't just keep blowing our money on this. We went to our first card show. And then at the card show, it was a lot different than being at the card shop, which is way different now because card shops, a lot of them are super cool and they're willing to negotiate with you. But
Yeah.
back then, it was like card shops were crazy priced, and it was you versus them, and it was either buy it or no. So when we discovered card shows, like you could actually like buy something, and this was like really early eBay internet days. You could buy something from one dealer, walk it over 50 feet, and flip it and make money.
Yeah.
Um, so I just remember like being 13, 14 years old and go to a show and being able to make 50 to a couple $100 in a weekend, which was insane for a
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
And then just that
How
kind of
old were you at
part,
this time?
I mean, 12, 13, 14, and like literally every year, it just kind of kept steamrolling. And then like once grading, I really kind of bought into the whole grading thing. Um, it steamrolled quicker, but it's like anybody who asks me like like how did I get to this point now? I can't even tell you because it literally was just like slowly, 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 and then next thing you know, it's like I did roll like all the money I made. I just definitely early on, I rolled back into cards.
Yeah.
So just like kept compounding my inventory over and over, and then next thing um, you know, we're here.
How many years would you say you rolled it over for?
Till 2004.
Before you started pulling shit out.
Well, so 2004,
Yeah.
I was like 23. 2004, 2005. I was bored at that point, and I sold my collection for a lot, and then
How
I
much is
was
a lot? Do you want to disclose that or no?
uh,
Do you want to give a ballpark?
a Canadian or like around
No.
20 around 20 million. Yeah, and I was gonna like retire because I thought that was the cool thing to do. not realizing I'm like an addict to work, right?
Yeah.
So it lasted like 3 or 4 weeks. And then I had some friends down in Florida making a bunch of money off real estate. So, my whole life I was told real estate was the safest thing you could do. So what do? Of course, I take all that money and then some and dump it all into Florida real estate in like '05, and then basically turn 20 million into negative a million over the next 2 years. So in '07, I was about negative a million in the hole. So it's fun, really, really fun time in my life.
How do you come out of that?
Um, there's a lot of depression, a lot of weird thoughts for a while, and then I actually have a friend, very similar situation, kind of sold a lot of money and invested in real estate, and he never got out of that dark path. Like he's still in a hole, but you kind of just say fuck it, man, and just like it's either one way or the other. So I rented a 1 bedroom apartment and like kind of disconnected from the world for about 2.5 years. And about a year in, I remember not even a year, probably 2 years in, I remember like having everybody paid back and finally having like a little bit of money to work with again. And then the next year, so it took me about 3 years to like really recover.
Yeah.
And that point was just, it was like working 18 hours a day, so you pass out on the floor, get up. But my goal at the time was um, send 200 cards to PSA every day, ship off or list 200 cards on eBay every day, ship 200 cards every day. Like, so it was like I had like just a strategic, like this has to be done before I can go to bed. And then I ended up hiring like a couple friends again and just slowly building it back up. But it was a wild
200
time. So
200 cent a day, 200 listed a day.
yeah, so it's 200 cent a day, like ship the 200 a day, because like every day, you have two. So that was my mindset of like I need to send off 200 cards for grading every day. I need to send off 200 cards or list 200 cards on eBay. And back then, because I didn't have a huge bankroll, there's a lot of like goofy Jeter card, like weird stuff you could buy for $1 or $2 that was $100 in a PSA 10. And still like the fees back then were like $5 or $6.
Yeah.
So you could find really good margin stuff. So I was really fortunate that, and the number one thing is I still had maintained all my relationships. So I was lucky enough that I'm not going to say who it was, but there was a really good friend of mine in '07 that loaned me like $250,000 to kind of get back on my feet. That his financial people told him don't do it, and he's like, so I paid him that back and then some interest, but like that really saved my ass, because obviously the more money you have to work with in this business is a huge part. So you either gotta, grind it from dollar cards on up, or like that
Yeah.
definitely probably springboarded me like 2 or 3 years.
So you get the infusion of cash. Like what happens next? Like what's the first thing you're like, as soon as I have cash, like this is what I'm going to be buying? Like, do you stick with the Jeters or
Dollar boxes.
really?
Yeah. Like shows, dollar boxes, like sitting in a chair, like reviewing stuff, like being way more picky, to the point where like when you can afford to be less picky, when you have extra income, you can literally just buy the entire box and just
Yeah.
do the work later. But
Yeah.
like at the show, it's like you're sitting there all weekend, like
Like you're
reviewing
doing the
stuff and
math in your head every time you pick up a card and you're like, I'm deciding to buy this dollar card and like because I'm making $7 on this or I'm making $6 on this.
oh, oh yeah. And
Yeah.
after the cash infusion, like a little more aggressive, but like no, before that, I remember waiting for some of those eBay sales to go through to like hit the PayPal debit card to go to the grocery store and get groceries, and like trying to like figure out like how I'm going to cover. It was a wild time for a couple of years.
It's funny. I mean, people talk about like this industry and like especially the people who've been around for a long time and like who've actually gone all in on the industry. And a lot of people are like envious of like some of the collections that they have, or maybe some of the wealth and notoriety that they've acquired, not knowing that like part of that process like is these like massive valleys, right? Like
Yeah.
I feel like
Oh
so
yeah.
many people who have been in the game for a long time like have these massive valleys, especially because cards kind of just bottomed out in the 90s, right? And so, and again, like that massive market crash in the mid 2000s, like you're holding a piece of cardboard. Do you know what I mean? So even if you hadn't sold, like at the end of the day, that is a piece of cardboard. Like I know we love sports cards. I love sports cards. You love sports cards. And many people who listen to this love sports cards. But at the end of the day, when banks aren't willing to lend you money, and you have to pay your bills. Guess what? Like that piece of paper means absolutely jack shit. Like
Yeah,
you can't pay your
it was
bills with those.
it was a scary time. And actually, I feel like, I mean, we not to fast forward because we'll go back to this, but like when COVID hit, I was in another full blown panic, and I also have like like severe anxiety from what happened in '07. So when COVID hit, I was like, oh my god, like I'm gonna go broke. Like cards are because 70% of my net worth is still invested in inventory.
Yeah.
So like I had this panic, and there was like a crazy 6 weeks where the uncertainty. And if you asked me what could end cards, and I'm like, well, if you took sports away and everything that happened, so the fact that cards like not only pulled through what it did, and obviously it went way crazier than what it should have, and all that stuff. Um, but to me, like I'm so much more bullish, and I was pretty bullish before,
Well,
but
70% of
now,
your income, bro, or 70% of your net worth. Like you're telling me you're bullish. Of course you're fucking bullish.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, but because of what happened, it just kind of proves, like, I mean, we just went through something that may never happen, hopefully never happen in our lifetime again. Like,
I can't
this
imagine
is,
anything like that ever happening again, man. Like the last time that
but
happened
just
was
some,
what 100 years ago. Like
but
I
just
don't.
such crazy shit. And then for cards to like not only survive but like thrive. So
Yeah.
for cards to thrive through that, and yeah, so and I kind of saw us getting to a certain point where we're at now. I just didn't think it would happen for like another 10 years. So like COVID to me just like literally fast forwarded everything um drastically, like several years. So but yeah, I jumped ahead. So yeah, I just was thinking how when you were
No,
saying,
that's okay.
the crazy times are just like, yeah, but it's like cards are, it is just cardboard, but like, art's just art, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
gold's
fair.
just gold. Like it's
Yeah.
just, like, but the way I felt in '04 when I sold everything, I did have that feeling. I was like, man, like I'm not invested in safe stuff. I need to be in real estate, when the reality is, if I would have kept a lot of that stuff, I remember selling LeBron James Exquisite for 9 grand, and just thinking, like I can't believe someone just paid that.
Multiply that by
So
like 100,000 now.
right. So it's just like, so it's just such different times, man. Like it's been a ride. And what you
That's
said, like, yeah, like
crazy.
everybody sees my collection now and all this stuff, and it's like nobody knows the history of the crazy rough times of just grinding. And reality is, I gave up a lot of my like 20s and teens and stuff to like, do shows. I would travel, and you know I would in high school, like this is another great story, but Frank and Son is a really popular show out in California,
Yeah.
Wednesdays and Saturdays. So my junior and senior year, I would Tuesday after school fly to LA, skip school Wednesday, and then take the red eye home, and be in class Thursday morning. To the point where, like, at some point when I kind of started to like push the edge a little bit, I had to wheel it back in a little bit. But I mean, I was flying to California once a week just for that show.
Really?
Yeah, in
And
high
where
school,
you
starting my
where
junior.
were you?
I'm Michigan, 5 hour
That's
flight.
that. I was like, that's not an easy flight either, though. It's not like
No,
next
five,
door,
five,
man.
no, 5 hours. Like that red
Plus
eye was
plus
like,
the time change, man. That's a rough one, bro. That's a rough one.
yeah.
Man, good on
I,
you.
I'm, I'm, I remember, yeah, landing at 5:30, and then like trying to beat a class by 7:15, and just a struggle, but still kind of having that rush because, like, you just came off a card show, which is fun.
Literally.
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
you so you've mentioned this to me before, but and briefly on Jeremy Lee's podcast. How many Jordans exactly do you think that you've personally submitted to PSA? Like, because
Submitted, or how many?
well, how many
Because
times do you
Jeremy,
think how many times do you think you've submitted a Jordan rookie card to PSA?
that I don't know. Like I this thing I initially said 110s that I've received, but I mean it's probably like closer to 75 realistically. But
But there's
like
only
actual,
330 of them out there. So that's like
yeah,
20% of the
I
population.
would say the over under is probably 75 is my guess. But I mean, I've submitted. I couldn't even tell you, but like what I can tell you is the PSA 9 pop report is like 2,900, and like I would guess that's closer to 2,000. Like I
There-
personally I've cracked at least 300 or 400 nines myself,
Really?
and I know other guys that have cracked a lot. So like I would guess the pop report on the nines is off by like 800 to 1,000.
So do you think that the nines, like the pop? So do you think that the nines that are nines now are like that's it?
Yes,
There's
they're
no more
yeah,
juice left.
yeah, and that's kind of like, to me, the whole cracking game is pretty much over. Like I haven't really submitted much to PSA. I've submitted like 50 cards in the last 3 or 4 years,
Yeah,
and it's like when I was doing it, when I was playing like the cracking game, there's probably like 4 or 5 of us doing it, and it was all like brand new, like just stuff that's been graded once.
yeah,
Now you're fast forward 25 years later, you have cards that have been tried 5, 10, 15 times maybe, and now you have 1,000 guys doing it.
yeah,
So it's just like the game's over. Like now when I see somebody who has the idea like, oh, there's a Jordan I'm going to crack it, I'm like, guess what? It's probably been tried, and you're not the first person to think of this idea.
yeah. Well,
So
Probstein tried to cross what 30 tens and couldn't get a single. Was it? Do you want a black label or just a BGS 10?
just a BGS 10, which is such a big marketing miss by Beckett. Like I don't know, like nobody would ever complain if you put a PSA, one of the PSA 10s into a BGS
Out
10
of
holder.
30 of them,
Yeah,
like I don't
and
understand.
I've hit two of the BGS 10s as well.
How many BGS 10s are out there?
I think there's 6 now. So there was, yeah. And I know where 5 have come from, and I bought and sold the card probably like 10 times.
What
Where
what what spurred
the
you to
cheapest
send the oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Keep going, keep going. I'll ask a question
oh no,
after.
I'll say the cheapest I ever sold a BGS 10 Jordan for was 44,000, and the most I ever got for one was like 250,000.
I mean,
So like
that's a
over,
decent chunk of change. What do you think they're valued at right now? If you had to put
I'm
a
not a
number
very
on them.
big BG I'm not a very big BGS fan. I would much rather have the equivalent to like, let's just say, a BGS 10 is worth $1 million, which I don't know if it is or not. I would so much rather have 5 PSA 10s.
Yeah.
Or
Why?
even more so, to narrow that down, I'd rather have how many PSA 9s it is.
Really?
Yeah, that's just me
No.
personally. Like, yeah, I'd rather have the equivalent in value. Like, if I had $1 million to spend, I'd
Yeah.
rather go buy a bunch of PSA 9s or like 5 PSA 10s versus one BGS 10.
What about the BGS 10 or Beckett?
I just think I think it's just, so one of the BGS 10s I got was like literally a PSA 9 that I cracked out and just sent it back to.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. And like if you cracked out 100 BGS 10s right now, like you might get like, you know, 29 fives, like some trims, some sevens, some 10. I mean, like it's going to be such a clusterfuck of what the great, like if you cracked out 100 BGS 10s, like you may not get one BGS 10 back. Like it's going to be so all over the board that I couldn't even, I would love to see somebody try it because it would be entertaining.
So what was like the determining factor of you submitting those BGS 10s then? Like were
Just
you
at
just
a
like
show
these are
and
like pristine copies, or you're just like fuck it, let me give it a shot?
well, you got to remember there was a point when BGS was worth more than PSA.
I mean, that wasn't very long ago, man. That was like probably like 5 6 years ago, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the 2000s, a lot of the BGS 10s I got were like a long time ago.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, at the time of BGS 95 was so like if you had a really nice PSA 9, basically the goal was like crack it, send to BGS first, try that,
Yeah.
and then see,
Because
and
I mean, you get like the
then
9.5, you get the 10. I mean, you get the black label. Like, there's like a few options there, right?
yeah, there's no black label back then, but yeah, like literally just playing the game, and then then whatever then try crack it out of that, send it back to PSA, send it to SGC, and like try to get the max grade you can, and then move on to whatever. But yeah, it really was just cracking and seeing what happened. But what the difference between now and back then is there was really so much less downside because you didn't play there's no upcharges,
Yeah.
right? So like now if you crack out a PSA 9 and you send it back to PSA and get a 9, they're going
You
to
get
charge you a
upcharged.
thousand
Yeah.
thousand bucks.
Yeah.
Where back then it cost me $10. So it's like, and even if if you miss something and you cracked out a 9 and they decided to hose you and give you a 7, okay, you crack it back out and like try it again. But like the downside was just so minimal.
Well, the downside
There's
was like
such a and then such
$6 and
there's
like a
nothing. Yeah,
3 week turnaround time. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. The risk reward was just not there anymore. I mean,
do,
the game is virtually over,
do you
in my
think?
opinion.
Ooh, do you think that all the cracking and resubmitting left a bad taste in people's mouths?
We talked about this on Jeremy's podcast. It's like I've talked to some people that for some reason it's like I don't know. There's some people that are just going to hate everything,
Of
and there's
course.
some people who don't care. So yeah, so it's
Yeah,
all
yeah,
over the board. Like um, we did try like in the late '90s to like save the pop report. We tried to set up this buyback program where PSA was going to pay us like 25 cents a label, but it was so hard, and so many people started to do it where it just became unmanageable. And so yeah, the pop reports, like I just tell people, assume that they're like 20% off. And cracking and resubmitting is just it's a thing. Like if you don't like it, don't collect graded cards because
yeah,
like,
yeah.
it just is what it is. And like the other side is like if you don't like graded cards and you want to go to raw cards thinking you're safer, you're not at all. Like graded cards is like it's not perfect by any means, but it's definitely like the necessary evil because the raw cards is just the wild west, and like most people are gonna have no idea what they're looking at when it comes to raw cards.
Yeah, well, I mean, I saw a video that you did with Sports Card Investor, Jeff Wilson, like 6 months ago, maybe, where you spotted a Jordan, like a fake Jordan, from
Yeah,
like a considerable distance away. Like, I'm like, I don't know how much of that is
yeah.
luck, but I do believe that like you probably have a crazy eye for spotting fake Jordans, considering how many you've submitted. I mean, cracked out, like submitted just period. Do you know what I mean? Like opened out of packs, submitted,
No, that was
cracked out, resubmitted. Like that's nuts.
no, that was a legit video. Like we literally like we
Yeah.
just goofing. It wasn't even with this film crew. Like we just had pulled out an iPhone and we're like,
Yeah.
let's test this. And like we were like mapping it out, and it got to the point where I just like couldn't physically see any farther. But like, yeah, I could tell. And it's generally like when someone pulls one out of a package, like within a millisecond, I can say like real or fake. Um, and there's different times where I knew like even who was probably faking it, based off of
Really?
like yeah. Now there's just so many reprints.
Are
Like
you saying like
reprints
a
are everywhere.
specific individual?
Yeah, back in the day, there was different people. Like yeah, people out of Mexico. Like there's been some characters over the years to try to do it, and but that was back in the day. Now it's like if you look on eBay, I feel like there's just almost every card is, and then like they write RP next to it,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
being
yeah.
secret, which it's all
Reprints.
it's
Yeah.
such bullshit scam to like sell a Mike Trout when you're getting $30 for a Mike Trout update that says RP, like clearly you're scamming somebody because it's cards worth 50 cents. It's not worth anything.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't like it that eBay allows that because it's just not good. And that person, like I see it all the time with ISA. People send us, Jordans or not just Jordans anymore. So many different cards, and it's like the people are pissed.
Do
It's
you
like
ever
I
get like
bought
ultra
this for.
modern fakes?
We got the PMGs in, and those are being faked out of Taiwan, and they're really good, man.
The new PMGs?
Like the greens and the reds from like the late '90s
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
basketball.
Okay, yeah, okay. So
Yeah,
that's
like I mean,
really
like
the re
literally, they're like all the grading companies have graded them. So like
really.
that's how good the fakes are. Yeah, I mean they've all kind of like realized. Well, couple of them have realized, and they've figured it out and stopped it. But like they're really good fakes. Like I remember getting them in and just being like, holy shit! Like these are there. Like these are close, but there was some stuff that was off.
What was off about them, if you don't mind me asking?
I mean, they just the smell, the feel. Like it's hard to explain when you're just around cards, like and you just know what an original is like. But yeah,
Yeah,
like if
but I
I
like
put
this
them like right
dialogue
here.
though, because like again, like people, I mean, they don't understand how like entrenched you've been for cards or with cards for like 3-4 decades. Like the fact that you said the smell of the card, that was the first thing that came to your mind.
Oh
Like
yeah, I
that's
mean,
pretty freaking interesting.
yeah, people laugh, like especially on the vintage cards. Like, I mean, I'll like, and people are like, "What are you doing?" And like, it's like, I don't know. It's when you literally grade cards for 8 hours a day for 25, 30 years. It's just like, it's like and you're trained. Like when someone walks in, you're like, okay, like, we're gonna do. If you do A, B, C, and D, like we're gonna get. It's like
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
a
yeah.
map of how easy it is for you. And I don't want to say it's easy because like technology and stuff's getting better, but a lot of it's like, yeah, like that Jordan video is, like, yeah, no fake Jordan would ever get past me. Like, I know that sounds arrogant, but it's like most of them are laughable fakes.
That's
So I
that's
don't know.
really interesting. What how do you feel about the ultra modern? I mean, what do you still like collect? Are there things that like you're looking to buy? Like where does that, like where are you at right now? I know that you're grading now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in this weird spot where like I just love cards so much, and like I'm working way too many hours than I should be. Like I actually feel guilty. I should be spending more time with my kids, but like I'm an addict, and it's like if I'm not working 100 hours a week, I don't know what I'd do with myself. So as far as I've been building some of these other businesses and the grading and company, and as far as my collection though, I am addicted to buying. The only thing that I've kind of changed is like because I have so much quantity, I've kind of like been going through and like maybe selling off some like cards that like have less eye appeal, but then replacing them or just buying more. Like if something's a deal, I'm going to buy it no matter what. But I've been more picky with what I've been buying. Like and like when I say that, like I like Wayne Gretzky eights to me are like super undervalued, and it's like I won't like I want to. My old me would have just bought every single one, and
Yeah.
I probably only have like I say only, but I only have like 48s of that card, and, and I know I said only, but like it sounds people are gonna give me shit for that, but
That's
like to me
okay.
that card is so undervalued. It's like who's the best basketball player? Well, I guess there is argument there. Like people would say LeBron or Jordan. It's clearly Jordan's the answer, but like in football, it's there's just one answer, right? It's
Yeah.
Brady.
Tom Brady.
And in hockey, but in hockey, it's not even close. Like there's
No.
just like there's no argument. So
No.
and what I love about the vintage is if you want a Gretzky rookie, you have two options. If you want a Jordan rookie, I think you have one option, maybe two options if you include the star. We could get into that crazy story too if you want to hear some star basketball.
Kind of do.
But um and then but even like if you get to Brady, there's 135 different Brady rookies,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is nothing compared to Trevor Lawrence. Like Trevor Lawrence, there's like I think there's six. It was like there's 1,100 different one of one Trevor Lawrences, and there's 6,000 different rookies of Trevor Lawrence. So like the evolution going backward, like 6,000, like 135 now. Brady doesn't seem that crazy,
Yeah.
but then now it's like all of a sudden Jordan and Gretzky. You're telling me you have one or two options to choose from,
Yeah.
and then of that, like you can hit every price point. Like if you're even on super low grade, like you can eventually build up and save $1,000 to buy a PSA 3 Gretzky rookie.
Yeah.
And then obviously for people with more money, they can buy sevens, eights, nines. So I like the fact that there's like price points based off the grade, but like every time someone's like, I want you to build me a collection, I'm going to add a Jackie Robinson Leaf, a Jordan rookie, a Gretzky rookie. Just to me, like those are the staples. Um, so going back to where my point was, I'm now like, I've passed on like the last two Gretzky's that I've seen because
Yeah.
I didn't like them as an eight, where I'd rather pay a grand or two more for one that's like dead centered versus one that just like looks like a seven to me.
Oh, really? So
So
like now it's all about eye appeal. I like that.
yeah, that's kind of where I've been going. Like I've just been like more picky in
Do you
that,
buy into
just
like the
because.
the NBA authentication and stuff, like the
So
PWCC like top 5% eye appeal?
kind of. So I've known Mike. He
Yeah.
was one of the head guys at PSA back in the
Yeah.
'90s. So I know Mike. I know Mike really well, and super smart guy. So like, yeah, definitely like getting his opinion on something. I don't really need it because I can kind of look at it myself. But I
Yeah.
think for like a newer um, person getting involved, like yeah, I think is definitely a premium on a nicer card, like a 9.7 Jordan versus 9.1. If there was it's like there's a Jordan that just made it into a nine,
Yeah.
and then there's a Jordan that like was on the verge of a 10, but just like didn't quite make it. So like, which one would you rather have? Obviously, like, and technically you could make an argument, like if a Jordan 10's 200 grand and a Jordan 9's 20 grand, how much of a premium would you pay for one that looks like a 9.9?
Like could be a 10.
So,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at. Like, that's in my collecting these days. That's kind of what I do.
That's awesome.
I'm,
So
I'm, I'm drinking by
no,
that.
no,
So
man, you do your thing, bro. Do your thing. I would be hard pressed not to ask a question like this, but so where does all of the trimming stuff start? Like I'm not accusing you of trimming, but there are
yeah.
accusations out there of trimming and often associated with it. Like, where does that even come from? Do you know, like, what
I,
started
I,
it?
I, I, I think I know. I think it was one person who is like, initially there's this like anonymous list that got released from an ex PSA employee who, like, well, nobody. It's an anonymous list from nobody. I know it was a PSA employee who did it, like who
Okay.
got fired.
Yeah.
So I think he was just like pissed or jealous, whatever. 4 people on the list are dead or were dead. Um, and then basically just kind of got ran. I think a lot of jealousy. And I did admit to, like, in the late or early 2000s, like I used to cut down a lot of sheets for Beckett. Not a lot
Yeah.
of sheets, but I used to cut down sheets and grade into Beckett. Beckett openly graded sheet cut cards. So I definitely did that. But like I really made so much just cracking nice cards,
Yeah.
and in playing that game, I never really got involved. Like I knew that people were like, you know, trimming card, doing all that stuff. I mean, pressing corners down, taking creases out, like to me, all that stuff's fine. Definitely trimming is probably like, there's going to be a line. Like I know people that like they want the card straight out of the pack into a holder, and like if you literally breathe on it, it's altered.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then there's like, taking a card that's ripped in 2 pieces and putting it. So like there's definitely trying to find the line of like what's acceptable, and I think that's kind of like on everybody's scale, and most people agree that like trimming's across the line.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people feel that like taking creases out, pressing corners, all that stuff is acceptable. But then there's other people that want to roast you for that. So I don't really know, other than like I do get a lot of jealousy, and I
Yeah.
can think of like 2 or 3 people that, but like everything literally stems from that.
The
And then it's just kind
list.
of like, yeah, like, and then
Yeah.
it's like a couple guys did, and it just snowballed. And my argument was, and there's people on the list that I recognize that definitely have done some shady shit. Like I know,
Yeah. Yeah.
but nobody else is like out. Like, and there's a lot of like these before and after pictures, which is a whole other thing that I don't even know. We're starting to see a lot of like double serial numbered stuff popped up. So it's like
Yeah.
I don't even know if the before and after pictures. But what I always ask people, I'm like, I've submitted millions of cards for grading. Like, show me something that I've done, because I'd love to see it. Like, am I
Yeah.
am I any good?
Yeah. Show me the
Because
show me the before and after.
right, for real. And then like then the conversation is like, well, whatever. I heard from so and so. I'm like, okay, well, go ask so and so. And then it's just like it all stems back to, oh, I saw this on a message board. I'm like, okay, like literally, like we're gonna sit here and talk about anonymous people. So like I don't even think about it anymore. And I
Yeah.
know it's like and same thing is like I have hit a lot of big cards over the years.
Yeah.
But what people don't see is like when I hit a Jordan 10, like they don't see the other 100 cards that were submitted in like sevens, eights, and not, and just all the bullshit that goes with it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and when you submit a ton of, all this, like a Jerry Rice rookie is like an impossible card. But like if you
Really?
crack 86 Rice rookies are impossible. They're so hard. I think
What's
I've only
the
hit like
is
low
that like
pot.
your white whale? Is that like the one that just always gave you difficulty?
I just gave up. I think I've hit 110 in my
Really?
life.
You gave
Yeah.
up on okay,
Yeah.
okay. Really?
It
110.
wasn't, yeah, it wasn't a good break. It was not a good break.
Like right out the
It,
pack, you mean?
yeah, like they're impossible. Like they're so hard. So like I tried, and it did become a game at that point too. Like crack it, like trying to get a 10, where like 86 for a basketball for me. Like now it's not a good break because of the cost of the boxes.
Yeah, of
But
course.
in the early 2000s, like I made a lot of money because everybody thought, and I was like this trust fund kid, which was hilarious because like I come from a very poor family,
Yeah.
and they just thought I was this trust fund kid who loved cracking 86 for basketball. And at the time, it was like I was paying 12 to 15,000 a box. And if it was a really bad off-centered box, you'd probably get like 7 grand back. On a good centered box, because the corners all come like 10. Like that's when
Yeah.
everyone's like, oh, you trim the Jordans. Be like, if you've opened an 86 fur box, you would see that like the cards are perfect. Like they come out like you wipe
The
the
gum.
gum dust up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're so they come out 10s as long as they're centered. So like if you hit a center box, you'd make 150, 200 grand. Well, then once I said, people are like, that doesn't, the math doesn't add up because, Jordans at the time were only worth, 5 to 10,000. But people forget that all the set builders, they wanted the commons and the stickers. Like there was a point when Jordan was like the 20 most expensive card in the set,
Really?
which sounds crazy now, but like Dominique Wilkins checklist, like the checklist back in the early 2000s, I've sold a checklist 10 for 50,000.
Really?
Yeah. So like these
Well,
set
because like
builders were like,
no one was submitting them, and like the population of them is so scarce, right?
well, they're really hard. Like where they were placed on the sheet, like Jordan's actually one of the easiest cards in the set. It gets scrutinized way more because it's Jordan, but like the Johnny Moore is obviously really hard. The checklist of Dominique, Alvin Adams. I mean, there's 20 guys that are really really hard. So these set builders were super educated back then, and they would literally get in these like at shows because this was like right, not a lot going online like there is today.
Yeah.
And you'd get a couple guys at shows fighting. They wanted to finish their set, like they needed an Alvin Adams 10, and you'd get them to pay 10 to 15,000 for a really low pop common, which literally one card takes your entire cost out of the box.
Yeah.
So like I like really quietly just like, yeah, I'm sitting here ripping 86 Fleer. I really enjoy it. And meanwhile, like made a fortune grading that.
You're
So
just grading like all of them, like
yeah,
everything.
yeah. And it's like, yeah, if you hit a centered box, it was just like checkmate. It was fun.
How many full sets do you think exist?
Well, there was 244,000 printed, but then you
No,
gotta
I'm
remember
saying
in
like
late.
tens, like tens.
Oh, you could go on the registry. I mean, I've put together maybe like 6 or 7 10 sets as I kind of like went along. Like if I couldn't sell something, I would just add it to a set, finish the set, and then sell the set. Over the years, just as like because I was getting a lot of tens. Like so, I've personally built 5 to 7 sets and sold them as sets. But I think the registry, I would guess there's 20 to 25 complete 10 sets right now.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
What
it's
is
wild stuff.
your, give me like one wild hobby story. I mean, you've already given me like 20, but like let's finish this episode off with one wild hobby story.
I mean, I have so many.
The first one that came to mind, what was it?
I mean, I have a like. Well, I wanted to. So the Star Basketball was
Yeah,
because we kind of want to bring it back to
let's
that
do
is
it.
like the reason I like 86 so much is 84 was the Star Jordan, but
Yeah.
the license ran up in 89. So basically, the person who had all the Star Basketball, they were printing them in 90, 91, and then I think in 92 they got caught. So I've always asked collectors this: if you had an 84 Star Jordan, but you then were told it was printed in 90, same, it's identical. Like
91.
you,
Yeah.
yeah, like would that change your opinion of having that card in your collection? It looks the same as if it was printed in 84, but I said, hey, just so you know, that card was printed in 1981. Would you care to own that card? So I just think that that's insane to me that like personally I wouldn't like I would like that just rubs me. That's why I've always been like anti like Star.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even
So
like, I mean, you see it a lot with like ultra modern stuff where like you'll get a buyback autograph and it's like, it'll be a buyback of the card, like an actual rookie card, for instance, but it'll have like an autograph on it from 4 years or 5 years later. Right. And like, even that,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
it just doesn't sit the same. You know what I mean? You're like, yes, it's signed and yes, it's an autograph rookie card, but it
Yeah.
wasn't meant to be this way when it was created. You know what I mean? And I don't know if that's some like neurotic collector thing, and maybe others can
It is.
bypass it, but there's like,
No,
like,
it is because
yeah,
like I said, like collectors, like everybody has their pet peeves,
yeah,
like everybody has their like what they, their niche and everything. But so that's, but I'm trying to think of I'll think of some wild stuff. Like we'll do part two in a couple months or something, and I'll
Love
think
that.
of some crazy stuff like on the spot. I want to give you a better one than just
So,
that. But
I did put you on the spot though, and like I said, you did give me like I can't even tell you how many stories already.
yeah, it's like if you like jawed my memory of like a time frame. I mean, it's like I I remember like the whole like the Kobe craze, the Tiger Woods craze. It's like those are wild errors. It's like Dante Culpepper tens were $4,000 in the late '90s.
What?
Like yeah,
Really?
yeah, like so just thinking back to
Who do you think the
it's
biggest
like
prospect that busted at the like is? And you've been here for a very long time, but like who was the most hype prospect? The card was the most expensive and absolutely ended up cratering.
well Zion's not looking too well right now,
But his
but
stuff
back in
is
the
still
day,
somewhat valuable, right? Like he's got some time to kind of pick his ass up. But I agree there.
yeah, he may never play again. From some things that I'm hearing, he might not play. He might never play again. But
Really?
um, yeah. Um, so in the late '90s, I mean, there's definitely like Vince Carter SP Authentic rookies. I think peaked at 20,000, and they got down to $150. So like you could have bought one for like, but a lot of that stuff in the late '90s, a lot of those football rookies, like I said, Dante Culpepper tens, 4,000 SP Authentics, 4,000, probably $20 card now. Um, yeah, a lot of those guys like were massive. Darius Mile. I mean, there's some basketball names that like most people wouldn't even know because the stuff was even a lot of the Kobe rookies. Like a Kobe Z Force 10 was 12 to 15,000,
Back then.
which in like yeah, and like probably got all the way down to 30 or $40. It's probably a $300 or $400 card now. But I mean, like a lot of Kobe rookies that the SI for kids, Tiger Woods. I remember those being 150 to 200,000. Those got all the way down to like a grand or two, and now they're back up to maybe I don't know 10, 15,000.
It's
So
crazy.
like yeah, there's some massive swings on some of that stuff.
That's
But
nuts, man. And so you're
but I'm
saying
have
vintage is the play.
it's boring, but it's way safer. Like yeah, I don't want to say any, but like almost any vintage that you had in the late '90s is probably worth a significant amount more now than. Okay, crazy story. We used to go to the live auctions, and at the time, Mastro, like
Yeah, of
there's a
course.
whole story there.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
Mastro live auction, we would drink, and then we would have these paddles.
Yes.
And me and my friends, we were young and dumb and stupid. We thought it was funny. We'd always steal each other's paddles, and then hold the paddle up and win stuff.
Like
So I
for each other
remember
almost.
no, like as like a gap, but like or someone would go to the bathroom. Like if you left your paddle, like you were fucked. So so there was a Mantle 8 that was up, and my buddy grabbed my paddle and won it for like 64,000. And I remember being like so stressed. Is like I was so pissed. I was like, man, I can't believe I just paid 64,000 for a 52 Mantle 8. Like
Yeah.
it was the highest price that someone had paid at the time. And I think I like was able to flip out of it and make like 3 or 4 grand. And it's like the relief of at the time was like, oh man, okay, I'm glad I got out of that one.
Yeah.
And it's like looking back, if I just would have been like tucked it away. Um, and speaking of the 52 Manolate on eBay, the biggest collector in the world at the time, and he's sold, but this guy Don Spence, um, no way you know this name, but like literally has had one of the top 3 collections of all time. He came on eBay in '96 and with a zero feedback account won a 52 Mantle 8 off me for 25,000. And like that look, that feeling when it's zero feedback wins something, you're just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
fuck,
yeah,
like
of
really like
course.
waste all my time.
Yeah.
So I get a message. He's like, "Hey, overnight you cash your check the next day." I'm like, "Whatever." And then he sure does, and like ends up like so literally like the probably one of the top 3 biggest collectors in the history. Like bought the first card off me. It was the
Really?
first card he ever bought was a Manolate. Pulled the trigger for 25K, and I remember just like being kind of pissy with him initially. We kind of joked about it years later
Yeah.
because he bought a lot of stuff. He bought a lot of stuff off me. But I'm like, yeah, remember when you bought the Manolate and I was giving you shit like,
For your
okay,
zero
I just,
feedback account.
so his
Yeah.
first feedback was a 52 mail lead.
I mean, that's not bad feedback to have. That's like 10,000 normal feedbacks. Like that's like
Yeah, like
sometimes
50.
I
That's a
go
good
into
for
people's feedback and I'm like, okay, like what did you buy though? Like an $8 card, $9 card. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like those still add up, but I'm like, we're talking about like a 25K card. Eric. Your feedback is
that. Well,
a little higher.
that's good advice. So if you're looking to not get scammed on eBay, if somebody has like some stuff up and it seems too good to be true, like go in their feedback history, because it's like if they have a $20,000 card up and like their feedback is like $1 to $4 items,
Yeah.
like that's a massive red flag. Like, oh,
Yeah.
that guy's got 200 feedback, but why are all of a sudden they selling a $20,000 card on eBay? Like,
Yeah.
be careful. The other thing is what people are, the authenticity guarantee is they're putting stuff in lots now, and eBay only authenticates singles. So it's like they'll do like a fake Jordan rookie, and then they'll add like one or two cards to it, and then it's a lot, so it bypasses eBay authenticity.
Really?
Yeah, so that
We're
was
getting
a big
getting the
scam.
inside scoop at the end of this one. For the people who stuck around long enough, let me tell you, there is
Yeah,
nothing but value on this podcast.
yeah,
Jason,
that's a
brother,
scam.
I'll go for it.
I understand. I know. I caught that scam like right when eBay authentic. I saw it. I'm like, why? Like, it just didn't make sense. I saw some lots. It's like people were running like a Jerry Rice rookie in a 9, which is a $2,000 card, and then they would add in like a couple like $5 cards. And I looked at their entire account, and then I'm like, wait, all these cards are fake. And then I realized that's how they were bypassing eBay authenticity.
That's
So
crazy. That's crazy.
yeah,
Jason, I
watch.
want to thank you so much for joining. There's definitely gonna be a part 2. There has to be. You have way too much, too many stories to tell, and it's been a good time. For anyone who's listening, where can they find you? Where can they contact you? Where can they support? Where can they reach out?
Yeah, at OTS Sports on social media, and then I'm usually obviously at the national and at a lot of the bigger shows. Please come up, say hi, and a lot of people afterwards are like, "Hey, I saw you at the show," and I didn't want. I'm like, no, bother me. Come say hi and chat. I enjoy that, and yeah, let's schedule a part 2. Have everybody like send some questions, and then we'll do
Yes,
a Q&A on the next one.
100%. Team, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Cardboard Coaches. As always, Coach Co and Jason Coombs out of here. Peace.